Okay. This should work. Oh man. That, the ad should run. I figured 2 minutes makes very little difference to the overall schedule, but it means I don't end on a. I close restream down. I did close restream down. That was foolish of me. Yeah, it should mean that I don't end on. So I get an ad 20 minutes before the end or something. So, or actually, I could still end on that, couldn't I? That's foolish. How I do math. I could end with 2 minutes of ads. Oh well. My brain, that worked differently in my brain. But we'll leave it in place for today and see how it goes. Um, okay, so the focus of today's stream is to get the status being recorded into the project. So, been a good morning. Nice. Well, good to hear it. Is the jury duty continuing, or have you escaped from that? At this point, I didn't see. I think I saw Mojo ask. Yeah. Didn't select me, but I was there from 7 a.m. through about 4 p.m. Oh, rough. So you're clear now? You get to step away? Or are you still on a pool of alternates or anything? Um, Coming up on the 27th of this month, which is in 2 and a bit weeks, by the way. The 27th is a Friday. Um, that marks exactly 25 years since I started being a developer. Um, so I am going to do a longer stream that day and maybe do a community day. And then, because it's a Friday, and it'll continue into yours. Um, still on the pool for the rest of the month. Was moved to the bottom of the list. Still in Takar. Because you showed up, they're giving you the respect of it's not making you. But that's cool. That's cool. Wow, that's a tough one. That's kind of weird. So yeah, 27th is Friday. 2 weeks this Friday. Um, I will have got back from Texas again on the Thursday. Um, but I figured I'd take the Friday off and do a longer stream. Maybe make it a community day. Open the Discord, have a chat, see if we can't have a nice day that day. So I will promote that more as I go forward. That was a last minute thing yesterday. I was like, you know what? We're gonna do it. We're gonna mark 25 years. Um, I will say I'm having a week or so of wanting to give this up and go into a completely different profession. Um, software development is challenging. It is frustrating. Um, it is rewarding. It is fulfilling. Um, so you have ups and downs, and I've been questioning a little bit. Yesterday's stream was a little bit of it. Um, the usefulness of this tool. So yesterday I went through. I wrote out some actual planning items. I added some requirements, the way that I see them, that I want to add them. Obviously, they're not displaying correctly, but that's okay. Um, and it started to reinforce my confidence again, which was good. Um, this is a tool that is missing from our current workflow. I really do believe that. So I'm going to continue on. I'm going to build it and see how it goes. But continue to, at this point, I think I'm going to try and start using it more, even if it's just to tinker with building out what I want to build. Use this to drive the stories rather than capturing them in space anymore. Space is getting deprecated soon anyway. I'm running out of time on that one. I've got to do something here. What I've got to be careful of is that I do not just go into reactive decisions, or rather, um, um, uh, reactive development. So I've got to think through the ideas. I've got to make sure that I reinforce an idea with an actual solid use case. I can't just be like, oh well, space has that. I need this now. Let's have that. Let's have that. I'm not trying to copy another product. I'm trying to build a product that stands alone. And this isn't, and I've got to keep reminding myself, this isn't stories. This is the seed of the stories. This is the um the branch from which a story forms. This is not a story. This is maybe the prologue to the story, right? The story is a result of these things. Awesome, super. Yeah, it's an up and down. There's that roller coaster, and um, I just had a little bit of a why am I doing this? Like, what am I doing? And it's not just with the software. Um, so yesterday we went through, we identified just this one requirement, right? This is exactly indicative of the thing I'm trying to solve, right? This seems like a simple requirement. As a user, it's helpful for me to be able to see the things that change. Oh no, not this one. Status. This one. Sorry. How do I stop running? Yeah, helps if you're running the application. Helps if you're running the application. How's that still running? I know what I'm doing. Honest, I'm a professional. Oh, restarted everything. Yes. Okay. That should be up. Things should be starting. Made it a little slower by starting everything after each one's completed. But it means that if one of them fails, the rest won't continue to try and start, and I'm constantly fighting the stop button battle. Again, there. I've also been taking the time to play more Gran Turismo as well. So in my evenings when I get back from karate and stuff, I've sat down and had some races. Um, in the week over the weekend, sat down and got some uh, games in with my brother. Taking a step back from the software, taking the foot off the accelerator a little bit. Yes, didn't even think about that as I was saying that, but whatever. um, not focusing 100% on this to the point where I'm getting frustrated is key to make sure you or to me at least, to make sure that I don't just get burned out on it. Come on, all 13 are running. Okay, so the application is up and running. I just need to log out and log back in again. You'd think I'd know this email address by now, wouldn't you? No, I don't want to get a crop out. User. Okay. So we have status of playing games. Um, and my point for this is always that if a product manager is writing this as a story, planning items do not need to live forever. They are a preparation tool for future work and as such have a life cycle so that we are not constantly having to update the review date of planning items. We need to be able to set the status of the planning item. So that would sound like a story. Setting the status. When editing a planning item, I should be able to set the status. The default status of a newly created planning item should be preparing. The available statuses are preparing, ready for planning, in progress, and completed. So this does sound like a story. However, that one item actually yields 4 pieces that if the application was broken up into teams, would be 4 different teams' responsibilities, potentially. At least 2 teams' responsibilities. So recording the status, so editing the UI, allowing us to capture it is this part. Recording doing the API part, adding there's no validation required. We've identified that, and then to update the integration events, we've got to update the database and all that sort of stuff. So that alone is a chunk of work, right? Then moving it to the view so that we can actually pick it up again is actually its own component, and then actually showing it on the screen, adding it to GraphQL, etc. That's a whole thing, and that's just tracking it as a string, not even tracking it as an actual lookup value as such. If there was, you know, if we go a little bit too excessive and make these an actual table of potential options, so we can flex it or change it quicker, then this becomes a more involved piece entirely. Since I got interrupted and I'm still reeling from jury selection experience, I decided that my wife and I are going to spend some of today, starting at 8 or so, going on a date. Wanted to take a scenic drive for quite some time, so we're going to do that. Nice. Nice. That's a great idea. Yeah. important to step back and get away from the computer and get away from that thing. Karate is normally my thing. Juju is a popular pastime for my coworkers. Morning, daughter. Eh. I don't mind the idea of doing jury duty. It's just they seem to be able to strike at the point of. I mean, there's never really a super convenient time, but like jury duty seems to come for a lot of people at the time when it's not like a good time. Like for my wife, if she got called for jury duty over the summer, that'd be awesome. She's a teacher. She's not. She's able to do that. But calling her up in September or you know, uh, um, May or June is a bad time. Okay, so let's move on with this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new branch, and I'm going to get away. Now we get to this point where I'm not going to have these numbers anymore. Now they don't hold any value to the system right this second, right? They're not actually linked to anything. There's no um well, how do I say it? There's no dependencies. So I'm just making sure that I have my things for after the stream. Um, this is merged, right? I didn't merge this. Uh, yes, I merged it. Okay, so we can delete that branch. No, we're better at that one. That's interesting. Distributed lots we don't need to worry about right this second. So all that to say, I just need to feature and then name it. But I do have some changes outstanding. So what do these involve? I won't lose these. Oh dear. Hold on. Let's do this. New branch, feature, um, delayed, change, enrichment, enrichment. Introduce can resolve on resolver changes. Okay, I'm going to commit and push that so it's definitely off my machine. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to check out development again. I'm going to build a branch based off partially implemented features. Let's stop running before we have issues there. New branch, feature. So this does get into a few different aspects of things we've talked about over the years on the stream. Obviously, I consider this to be now not a story. This is a planning item that is aimed at trying to gather requirements. Each one of these requirements can yield and will yield many potential stories or tasks based upon how you do your system, right? Now, in my world, all this is one, right? Because I am a solo developer, there's no point in me creating 4 different stories. But if there was different teams, like let's say there was a team responsible for the view integration and the GraphQL component, right? Then you know this might live there. And then there's 2 stories on the UI side. But from a branching perspective, right? Do I create 4 branches? Right. So this planning item, this requirement, these 4 items all resolve this one. No, it's not 4 repos. Right now, it's not 4 repos. It could be. I have been contemplating what it. So right now, there's 3 repos to this application. Only 2 of which are used for right this second. Um, but these 4 stories resolve this one requirement, right? Um, but and that's why I'm trying to do this, right? Because this is the sort of stuff we produce, but then we'd be debating over what is a story, right? Um, Not necessarily, depending on the order you do it in. Um, to some extent, maybe, because you would end up with, and again, because I'm developing this as a solo dev, all these 4 are going to be achieved in one PR because I'm not messing around with breaking this up. But if I'm just trying to contemplate what it would look like to give that guidance as to how you might break something up, because you could work on them independently. Um, the only thing that would need a feature flag would actually be the visual components. The business will have a hard time understanding what's being worked on. How so? What? Okay, dog. I've got to move my leg because my foot's gone to sleep. Sorry. Goes in the sentence above. Those 4 stories. Oh, sorry. I missed the incentive. The 4 stories only have meaning to a developer, maybe the dev manager, anyhow. The business will have a hard time understanding what's being worked on because those 4 stories, the business people won't understand them really. And that's kind of my point, right? The point is, this is what the business people care about, right? This is why I'm trying to represent this because this linking to 4 stories. So maybe this shows, 4, it shows the number of stories attached to it, right? When we generate it, right? It's this requirement that feeds those 4 stories. Those 4, and again, that would allow the stories to be more technical in nature because they don't have to hit the business requirement, right? But they can be broken down in that way. And they tie up to an actual planning requirement. So realistically, I'm going to do these as one branch, but they could actually be 4 separate branches. They are independent components. Yeah. Each one adds value, but again, until they're all merged back in, they don't combine. But and on the topic of feature flags, these 2, the story 2 and story 4, would potentially be the ones where the feature flag, because unless this was enabled, you don't want status. But I don't want to go into that rabbit hole right now. I don't have to worry about it. Right now, I can worry about all these 4 stories as one story, right? But realistically, I would break them down as 4. Well, I'd point them, yeah, I'd point each one of these. So let me give it a go. So, okay, let's go through a story. Being that I'm starting to do this, let's decide what my baseline is. So the problem is I don't have any stories to base it off of, but let's say adding a form to a page that loads data up and no, we gotta think more macro than that. There's a problem with the reference story. So what I've got to do is make sure I don't how do you point? Business people, the customers' points is kind of the weird part. Again, points are a forgivable estimation. If you start giving time out, time becomes an expectation. Points are interpreted, and you can forgive some imbalance, right? Points really shouldn't matter to the business people at a 3 or a 5 or whatever, right? It should matter that we say 40. That's the sprint 40. And next sprint we say 40, and they go, oh, we understand that. Would you add up those 4 stories? I don't want to. Points are not going here. No points will appear here at all. There's no point. There's no point in points being here, or no benefit in points being at this level necessarily. Maybe the summary. Maybe you can look at the actual sprint, but again, there's no. This does not tie to a sprint. This does not tie to anything like that. This just ties to a set of pieces, a set of stories. Um, so let's look at those stories. So we're going to update the endpoint. We're going to add a new column. We're going to create a new. We're going to update an existing handler because there is one existing for edit of a planning item. It does not need to be on create. Actually, it does. Update create handler to default status. That might be simple as it's verified, but yeah. Update command handler to set the status. No validation required on it. Update an integration event. That actually involves changing a second repository, by the way. So creating a branch on the foundation repository. In the past, I've hit one story as the middle and then pointed this accordingly. Right, so you've basically given yourself a reference story, but you've referenced them off one story in that group. What I would do is I create the reference story globally. Like, this is how much effort this takes in this system. And this is probably one of the more common cases. So if I say this is my reference story, right, adding a new endpoint, updating a database schema, adding a new command. So I've got to update a SQL script. I've got to update 2 handlers and create an event, an integration event. If I say that's a 3, right? Yeah, but in general, what you're going to try and do is find out what is your most generic action and use that as a reference, and then create that as the reference story for everyone to reference off of. Because everyone's measure against that being a 3, they know how difficult that is, so that everything else is relative to that difficulty. If you're in a team, capture status. So I'm updating the new UI. I'm updating the UI. I'm going to add a drop down. It's going to be a hard coded list. We need to update the store. We need to update the service to post to endpoint. So we just need to make sure the service includes that field. I'm going to say that's a 1. I guess to start, we could keep tracking the middle stories and after. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, what you're trying to do is you're trying to find which stories you're kind of referencing off as a common story, and then use that as a baseline of, and always evaluate it. Don't assume that it's always going to remain the same, because as you grow with the system, things might become easier. It might be better to reference off a different story to say that's our 3. And I kind of like using a 3 as a reference, because then you've got, depending on how you're doing it, 0, 0.5, 1, and 2 below. And then you can scale up. So you shouldn't pick something too massive as your reference story. It should be something you're doing on a regular basis. This is pretty much the most regular thing I do. So now we need to update the view. So this is updating a consumer, adding a new, capturing that event, creating a new schema in the database, updating the planning item view in that schema. I'll say that's equal to the first one. And then pull that model down and then display the value in the drop down that we've already created. So that's a 1 as well, right? Let's go with that for now. Let's see how we feel. But either way, right now I'm going to do them all as one thing, because there's no benefit for me to try and, yeah. Writing out the requirements in each one definitely helps in pointing. Absolutely. And again, the goal is we should be asking questions at this point, right? When editing a planning item, I should be able to set the status. The default status of a newly created planning item should be preparing, right? But from that, I took, okay, well, do we need any validation? Is there rules in place? What does the status represent? Am I holding to it just being a string? And I think I am doing right now. Where does it get included? Where does it go, etc. So ultimately, there'll be mock-ups here. So we'd have attachments. We'd be able to say, hey, here's a screenshot of this, the mock-up, etc. And we'll go more and more down that path of doing these things as we start to dog food this a little bit. But that's just this one, right? Visibility, yeah. There should be no large unanswered questions, only small stuff. Exactly, yeah. So this is a story development tool. Okay, so let's get started. So feature, again, I'm going to do all 4 stories in one, because it's not worth my time to just keep jumping back and forth. This is feature setting status on planning item. Okay. And we are going to need, I wonder if you'd want to track large questions back on the story, or planning item. You want to capture, like, the comments I think are necessary, because you do want to be able to add extra information or whatever to the thing. It might not be a requirement, it might be a discussion, it might be we had this meeting, by the way, here's a link and there's an attachment to a document. There's some sort of mechanism that shows flushing them out. So kind of, to me, this is why I always struggle with the concept of a story not being technical. The story is the piece of work that we need to do. We are the technical people, therefore it's invariably technical, but the requirements captured on it shouldn't be technical. I think the ability to make the stories technical represented so flushing out is probably represented. Yeah, it probably is a meeting, but capturing things like that, no validation required. The question was asked, it was answered. We've validated that thing. We've put on there. There's no validation required, right? Um, Maybe we say, hey, can we just capture that there's no validation necessary on these things? So we update the requirement. Again, don't forget this is meant to be a this can be a long-winded piece. This can be an entire document. This is not the final view of this. But we should ask them to validate, to capture. There's no validation required. Um, you know, maybe that's a separate requirement, right? When validation is required, maybe that's a separate requirement. It defines it. So the discussion that happens around these pieces, that's what we're trying to capture, without them becoming actual, solid, defined requirements, until we're ready for them. And then when we say we're ready, that's when the stories start to be produced. And a story does not just get copy and paste to this; it links back to its requirement, but it can be its own text as well, described by the developers potentially. Stories and so yeah. Okay, so first item: update the edit endpoint for planning item, include a status enum, introduce new column for status, add enum to present represent, right? So again, I've gone through and thought through this thoroughly. No, I haven't. Um, there's holes in this already. And I'm not trying to do them things deliberately, but I'm going to call them out when I see them. We hit the first ad break already. Yeah, put ad breaks for 2 minutes every 40, which does, as I realized, it does mean that we end on an ad still, but um, the ads are 10 minutes further apart, so we don't have 4 sets of ads in the stream. Okay, so when we post to a planning item, or we put to a planning item, sorry, this is the update. Got to decide whether I want whether that's the right verb. We capture this information. Obviously, we now need to add um, a status, and I outlined it as include a status enum. Enums are difficult when it comes from the endpoint perspective because you've got to map them because you can't share them. Why are you there like that? Shouldn't be there like that. Oh, why have you crossed over? There shouldn't be an overlap there. Ah, from route pulls in MVC, which means that has. I really shouldn't get bogged down in this, but Model binding. Route parameters. I think it just accepts the route parameters. I don't think it actually... bind from. There you go. I think that will just accept that. Guess we'll learn. Actually, let's make sure. Let's make sure we didn't break anything there. For that to boot up. I do feel that breaking these two components up, the stories from the planning items, from the stories from the planning, does provide the freedom for all the parties involved to do the things they need to do without worrying about the other party, right? It's going to be important to tie these two things together, though, right? I noticed the override. You're overriding a default method. There. Fast endpoints implements it by default, so you have to you override it because you override the one you want to deal with. Yeah. Fast endpoints has this endpoint class. He says, "Come on, go to the code." Yeah, yeah. Why are you not working? And that's broken now. There's times. There's times to use it. There's times to not. It's important to understand. Um, there you go. It still gets there. Does it bind everything? Is the question. So the details. We get all the details. We have the identifier. Okay, there we go. Sometimes just stuck using it as the best solution. Depends on the design you're trying to do. If you're trying to implement the default behavior, and you do want to override it, like I don't like the may thing, but you do want to override it in specific scenarios, then it's worth having that around. Um, I don't use it frequently. Okay, that still works. That's a good sign. Okay, let's do um, correct endpoint to use only endpoints I believe that's right. Yeah, fast 10 points. Okay. That's just so I don't end up with any quirky behavior or things I'm not understanding when I'm doing it. But the problem still lies, and again, just deferring that. And this actually changes the complexity of the story overall, right? Um, if I represent the status as an enum, then this is just a value. This is a string value that maps to an enumeration. If I represent it as an actual table and it's a GUID, then the status is a GUID that I've set to. The table gives me more flexibility. Do I know that there's going to be, so this is a Yagni thing, right? Do I know there's going to be anything other than, I've moved it off. Um, let's do bare view. Bare view gives me enough, and I can build everything else still. There you go. Do I know there's going to be anything different than preparing, ready for planning, in progress, and completed? Do I want to change them? Do I want to flex them? Obviously, yes is always going to be an answer from a product management perspective. If I say, do you want the opportunity to change this in the future without actually having to rebuild the application? Yes. It doesn't mean anything because you could have built dependencies upon a behavior. You could have built dependencies on a status. You have no idea where that is. So just saying, hey, let's make it a table isn't necessarily an easy choice. It also has an impact in terms of, um, so, um, yeah, but it also has an impact because it's not an easy thing to do here. So just because I make it in, let's say I make it a GUID, so that means that that is now a table. Well, now the table needs to exist. The values need to exist. That's a script. Also, where do I maintain it? How do I push it out there? So it adds more and more and more complexity because then if it's just a table, then I've got to create a script to populate the table. And I've got to track those IDs somewhere, and yeah, it becomes a little bit more involved. Other things need to know about that table, so it's not just as simple as saying, "Oh, well, just make it a table," because then who owns the table, right? I've seen instances where technically you could implement it faster, but then it's not possible to extend it because of the method chosen. If you do it right, it'll take longer, but if you never extend the behavior, that's possible without a rewrite. And that's the challenge that a lot of developers get into, right? Because it's like, well, can I honestly say Yagni to that? Or is it a maybe? So the right way is not necessarily the quickest way, but the right way is not necessarily the right way. Um, but the purpose of me sticking on this is the fact that it does have quite an impact as to the software development that actually has to be done based upon the choice. The the product management team doesn't necessarily understand the difference. They just say, "Hey, we want these four values," right? If we come to you 6 months from now and say we want a fifth value, we want a fifth value, right? Whatever path you chose then has to. So now we say, well, we can't just add a new value in. We have to rebuild the code, and they're like, well, it's just a value, right? So you've got to balance pragmatism and well, no, you got to be pragmatic about it. You got to be not what's easiest now, but not trying to predict the future. Yeah. I think XP would choose the right way, citing their constant refactoring principle. Well, again, the right way. Um, again, the right way right this second, by the way, because of the distributed nature of the system, the view needs that table with that enumeration. The only the view needs it. Only the view resolves it. But that means the view has its own data. Does the view have any? Does the right now the view owns inbox, which is coming out of there. That's wrong. Refactor whenever and wherever possible is the wording on the website. Everything else is in reaction to an event. So it's not right for this to own data in the current form. The inbox is wrong. It needs to come out to communications and be different, which is why I haven't focused too much on that piece since I started it. I think the right way here is to make this a string, map it to an enumeration, and it doesn't matter. We don't own this data. We don't need to know about it. Doesn't matter. Right now, the only requirements I have, I've always found the wording on that particular item to be extremely strong. I guess that's the XP part. The problem is that actions like the one I'm doing now are scary because there's one path that will take me down a new design path. There's one path that's a really simple path, will get me moving forward and will meet the requirements that I've been asked to meet right this second relatively quickly. But then the refactoring of that is scary. And what that should come along with is refactor whenever and wherever possible, and don't be afraid. Right? You've got to build code that you're not scared to change. And I'm not scared to change it. I'm just contemplating how much work it is based upon my experience so far with the application. Like, how much time do I spend? Like, I think I can get this knocked out. This is knocked out in the hour that we have left on the stream. So um, it's technically difficult just from a number of pieces it touches, but it's not that much time. But a spike wouldn't necessarily do me or the application any good because I know what's involved overall. A spike would be if I need to investigate the feasibility of something. Right now, the only major question I have there is if I create a lookup, right? So I say that status is a lookup that can be assigned. Who owns that lookup? That's the decision I have. And a spike isn't necessarily going to tell me that. To analyze it and contemplate it, it's an architectural decision, essentially. Even though it's data related, it's an architectural decision because it can have ramifications throughout the rest of the system. if I say that, let's say, because with projects, planning, tenant management owns projects. Projects are owned by tenant management because they are globally used, or they will be used. Yeah, again, Yagni, right? So here I go to projects. Do I have something similar for statuses? In which case, then tenant management owns status. But now, if tenant management owns status, I've got to produce that. When I add a new status, I've got to publish that to the rest of the system so that they can consume it. Well, now I've got more work involved, more complexity involved, because then every component of the system has to capture every component that cares about it. I mean, right now, view is the only real component, but view has to be set up to now content to consume status, and now it'll match up. Um, but it's not something I need. Nothing in these requirements has said that I need to do anything around maintaining these or making. No one's thought of that. Now, if I have to ask the question, we could have the honest question, the honest discussion of, okay, are these going to change? Is there another idea? Do we want to add these things? And if a product manager is trying to think about what they might need in the future, then they might do that. But yeah, spikes to answer questions for tough technical or design problems to reduce risk in slowing down development. Then the current design questions length of time doesn't fit. Well, so my way of approaching a spike is if a piece of work has more unknown than it has known, then you have to spike because you have to understand what you don't understand, is the way I look at that. Like, I understand what's necessary. It's just a decision as to where it goes. It's not an actual technical challenge. Um, but I think, based upon my own requirements, upon my own knowledge right now, I'm willing to say, and I'm actually, it's funny because um, one line was doing the design, uh, the redesign of his financial management system. He was playing this role playing aspect, and the more I'm talking about this, the more I'm getting into the role of being the devil's advocate developer, and I'm not actually treating it as if I just wrote this requirement, right? I can make the decision. Um, so it's kind of amusing to me that I'm actually um, taking on that role regardless. Mr. Ranhorn, good morning. How's things? Either way, all that all that discussion is necessary. By the way, I don't debate the necessity of doing what we just did. So let's add a column. Let's just whack a column on there. It'll be fine. This is where I don't like SQL Server. Modify table. Not bad. I'm thinking about working on my side project, so it's going to be a long work day. When you're distracted by the side. Yep, I hear that. Okay, so we're just going to call this stats. And right now, we're going to make it in varchar 50. It cannot be null. And because I'm adding it into an existing schema, too close to the weekend, I guess. I got sound working and now I'm inputting US to create trigger. Nice. Morning, Trap. How you doing? Anyhow, off to work. Don't have a great day at work. Thank you for coming and hanging out as always. Um, So the default status is preparing. Preparing. Right? So everything's preparing. Let's let's script out the DDL. Go to our scripts, planning items, planning items. Does it do? No, it doesn't. I'm not doing migration scripts, so it's fine. If I was doing a migration script, that'd be a different challenge. Sorry, my pool was closed yesterday, and there's some safety issues with it, and the dogs are going out there, so I'm trying to make sure that's sorted. Uh, okay, sorry, but our pool cover has network error. Interesting. Our pool cover has layout for the springs to go on in the ground, but there's been that many different pool covers, and it seems every pool company has their own opinions about where anchors should go for a pool cover. So there's just holes all over the concrete in different places. So everyone goes to put a pool cover on, and they're like, hold on, it doesn't fit because it's obviously tensioned differently based upon how the pool cover is designed, and it's so now there's going to be more holes in the concrete for a future company to be confused by if this company stops doing it. Um, so right now we're just going to put status in as a string, right? Because just grab the focus. That's annoying. It meets the requirements as we've laid out, right? And again, I know I'm the PM. I know I'm the person deciding the requirements. And I'm not trying to be what I've got to balance here is, am I just being pragmatic for the sake of moving forward with the stream? Am I actually achieving what I need to do? I don't know of any case where these won't be sufficient right now. I can't dream up a scenario where I'm going to add another status. Um, so for right now, it being a string is probably the most flexible thing anyway, because it means that I'm just swapping out a string. And later on, if it becomes a GUID or if it becomes a lookup, etc., it's literally just replacing that column and mapping it to something different. And yes, you have to create all the migration scripts and blah, 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 but that's an entire different problem. So anyway, let's capture status in there. Status will need to go into here. Do we have any tests around this is the first question, right? Because tests should be um, um, so I should be contemplating what it means to test. So planning items application concerning, do I have anything? I do not. Why do I not have something there? Because we use the service to do the update planning item. That just reminded me, I refactored my game server yet, system text JSON. Boy, do they have hate enums in that implementation. I had to refactor my usage of enums to strings since I could not get them to marshal correctly. Yeah. You just go and create the smart enums. Just create the class and map it back and forth. Yeah. Smart enums is like. Okay, so we actually use the service for this. So it is the planning item domain. Um, with enums, you get number or all uppercase. There was no in between. Gotcha. Actually, doing the Twitch API stuff, I made a bunch of those things where it just mapped to classes because Twitch has different casing and different values for the same enums, etc. Because Twitch API, why be consistent? And passing different projects. We need to have a talk about our naming here, buddy. I'm passing no associated project. Um, okay, let's go and look at what we actually do in here. So the service itself, right, is going to be in the domain services. That's right. Based on the monthly API, you can get different casing. Yes. um. So this will call. So the way I did this is the planning item itself is actually the one changing, determining whether something has changed, and determining whether it needs to actually update that value. So that the service just kind of coordinates that. Bypass. Enums are great. Hi, MKB. How you doing? No debate over enums being great. Enums are perfectly acceptable. But like Mr. Anhorn said, uh, they don't like enums in system text JSON. Yeah. It can be on a stack rather than heap. never got to the point where I've had to analyze code to the point where I do need to care about that so much. Like from a performance perspective, from a behavioral perspective. Um, true. Okay, so we're gonna end up with update status. So what we should say here is, um, because the idea of these by the way are, I'm using the same keyboard for moving between Mac and Windows, and obviously all the keys switch, so my brain's like not working right on like keyboard shortcuts and like alt modifier keys. I once took all string comparisons and seen a 200 FPS increase in my game. Wow. Wow. Um, so the purpose of this is so that it basically um, adds the domain event for the planning item. So, and the domain event has dedupe in it. So if we have added it, if everything adds it, it's fine. So that's why these methods exist. When status has changed, fact. Hello, dog. You okay? Hello. Oh, you coming help saying hello? Come on. Hello. Oh, hello. Hey, buddy. Oh, no licks. No face. Hello. Look over there. Look. No, you don't. Yeah, my own. Yeah. Yesterday he came and just literally sat across my lap. So he was stood up, but he was just laying across my lap. You okay, bud? Yeah, you like that? Web uses design patterns that by design add overhead. Even interfaces in DI add overhead. The interfaces are always bots on heap in C sharp. Yeah, I mean overheads. I mean overhead is kind of understood. I got into a bit of a debate over, um, you know, good. Um, when we need to start worrying about performance versus readability. Um, like a developer saying, "Hey, we don't need to create 5 methods when we can just put everything in one, because then it just, you know, it costs more, but it doesn't cost enough with what we're doing to make that a problem." You guys want to go out? I'll be right back. back. I always think we need a debate on when we need to worry about readability. I do think we can make things way more complex by the idea of let's split this out, create 9 classes to understand, and then link it to each other rather than 10 line all used in one place anyway. Single responsibility is nice, but mix it with the agony and yeah. Yeah. And I think again, if you take someone like Uncle Bob's advice to the limits, then that's how you get into the well. Now I've got 10 classes breaking up this code and different methods. You've got to balance. And I was kind of I don't know when you came in, but I was kind of discussing the challenges of like, am I overthinking something? Am I if I introduce this to be flexible, am I really benefiting myself? Like this is just going to be a string, right? Um, it should be a discussion you have, but if those 10 lines of code do very different things, or they do, they're not easy to understand. Um, I'm going to sound a little elitist, but not all developers are created equal, right? Some are more technically competent than others. Some are, just get it done, and um, don't think that way. So you got to find the balance. And in a team, you've got to make sure you're having the right discussions about um, whether the code is easy to understand. And from a maintainability perspective, um, I was kind of writing this yesterday. Like, if we refactor the code to make it tidier, to make it more readable, we increase the maintainability, we decrease the fear of changing the code because it's easy to understand. You've got to balance that out and make sure that is understood. Um, Status is captured. Update status is captured. Fact. Update planning item event is is so we want to validate there's a domain event when this thing happens. We can't validate. So the domain service will update the planning item and call update async. Where is the other tests? So you've got to build a planning item. 20 seconds left. Hi Hexic, how you doing? Welcome in. No bans, no problems today. I know, always comes to mind that my platform doesn't have a traditional game loop. It's all event based with small loops for each area. And readability is, you know, um, if you're working on a solo project, like to me, this code is readable, but it might be complete nonsense to other people, right? It might make no sense whatsoever. And I think it's important to have the right discussion. So coming back to, the thing that I originally said, like you've got to balance readability with optimization. And in most web code bases, you're not really going to notice um, a minor performance hit for using one technique over another. Not getting something from the heap versus a stack. You're not going to notice the little bits. They will add up on larger pieces if you're doing, you know, migrations or you're doing batch processing. That's when you need to start worrying about optimization. But I think that code inherently is less readable because it's aimed at doing something heavy. But the team has to make that trade-off. But no matter what, you should never be afraid of your code. And I think that happens too often. Okay, so we're going to build private planning item, read only, no, not read only, planning item subject. Let's add a collection. This doesn't matter, there's no associated projects. And let's create status equals original status. Expected status equals, let's just say expected, it doesn't matter what it is, but just it's different. So what we need to do what am I testing here? Concerning planning item updated. That's interesting. Concerning planning item service update. There we go. That's the one I actually want. When status is changed. Yeah. Let's move all this. And yes, I realize I just call it is and has differently. So I clearly ended up on is there. So for anyone joining today, what I'm working on right now is this requirement, right? So yesterday what I went through is I went through and actually added a few items into the planning item system to identify how I might want to use the actual product, to try and make sure that my ideas were heading in the right direction, because I had a bit of a wobble in terms of my confidence in that this was doing something that it would be useful. And I decided, you know what, I do still believe in what I'm doing, and I want to move on and make progress. So what I did is I created these items to kind of identify this is the sort of stuff I'm trying to do, right? So the idea would be the PM comes in here and says, describes roughly what they're trying to achieve with this component of work, right? And then they add the requirements. So I want to be able to do this. I want to see it here. I want to be able to see um, the grouping based upon the stats, etc. So then, as the development team, you know, I went and decided to look at this requirement first and identified that this actually involves 4 different stories, 4 different pieces of work that could be independent. They could be independently worked upon. Well, 3 pieces of work that really could be independently worked upon, but overall they could be worked on, and um, that's more 3B. Um, but they are different stories. So this would yield 4 different or 3 different stories, depending on how we talk about it, right? And now I'm just working through those stories, starting with story 1, which is actually recording the status to the actual planning item, and publishing that out as an integration event. So there we go. So in the act here, this is where this is so result is success. Review date is updated. Review date updated event is queued. Is queued. Um, private result equals null. Then we want this. And what we're validating here is that, yeah, here you go. So we need all these, right? And that is that. Let's align with the existing style. Right. Oh. So our subject here is not what it was originally, right? Our subject is not the planning item. Our range is not doing that. Our range is doing more this. So we need the object builder, the current status there. Then we can remove that. And this is current review date, right? Then we need planning item as an actual thing. No. So this is both yeah, James Earl Jones, 93 years old, which I think is I think that's a good time. A good amount of life. Ooh. Out for delivery already. Nice. He had a good run. Did a lot of great moves as well. How's it doing then? I was going to do something. Oh yeah, check on the dogs. I have a camera on the backyard set up so I can see the dogs. They're currently trying to tunnel out. Awesome. So status, current status, we're going to end up sending in the update status. What we need to do is capture the fact that we captured the domain event. And actually it's going to be this one. That's what we need to capture. Right. So the domain events of type planning item updated to count where they, pardon me, are for this planning item and this source user should equal 1, right? We also need to capture, let's find an easier one, review date. So we want to validate that we actually sent in the update to the actual review date. And this is going to break because it's not going to have it yet. P dot status equals expected status, right? Because this doesn't have expected status yet. So now we need to do this private string status. Again, this is done to protect the planning item. This is done so that um, the planning item can only be set, or rather, the status can only be changed through a method that is approving that change, right? So that's why these methods exist, is to make sure that if you're going to create an instance of a planning item, so let's say you say, okay, I want to check out the code, I want to make sure that this piece of code updates the planning item, and it's not a normal path. If you need to update a field, um, you can um, you can guarantee that it will publish the right event and the system will integrate it properly, right? That's the goal. That's why I'm doing it that way. Hey, Ez, how you doing? Just finished the daily. So yeah, we are going to this doesn't feel right. Preparing. That feels horrible. That'd be a magic string sat right there. Let's make that a little less horrible. Introduce field. Actually, let's do it that way. At least it's defaulted. It's not good by any stretch of the imagination, but it's better. So expecting the status to be expected status. And what else do I need to change there? I need to change the domain infrastructure, the planning infrastructure configuration for planning item. I need to declare that field maps. Right? This is how you tell Entity Framework. By the way, you actually are backed by a private field. Right. And again, that's to protect the. If you were to load up a planning item and then try and save it back to the database, you can't just load up a planning item and save it back. You have to call the method to update it. Without the method, it won't do anything. So our planning item domain service should invoke the method to update the thing. Is what we're testing here. So let's validate that. So there's more people in the stream right now, so I'm gonna say this again. On the 27th of this month, which is 2 weeks on Friday, I'm gonna do a community day stream again. So open up a Discord channel if people want to pop in and have a chat. We can do that. Kind of a Q&A if people have questions or we wanted to talk about projects or whatever. Just kind of make it a general community day stream. So longer stream, open up. Because the 27th of this month celebrates or celebrates maybe 25 years since the day I started as a developer. So I figured I'd do something. So we'll do a community day stream, 2 weeks on Friday, and I'll update the Discord and kind of repeat that a few more times. But if you wanted to jump in Discord and have a chat on that day, talk about software development, we can do. So this failed because it didn't actually catch this update, which is right. Nice. 64 gig of RAM and out of memory error. You've got a lot of particles. Where's your sister? She's still. We did learn yesterday that the one dog has no fear of the pool cover, so we're happy to have a pool cover that does. Yep, she stood on it. Professionally, because yeah, 25 years as an actual professional. I started September 27th, 1999. Yeah, I mean, writing code generally, when I got really interested in it, I was 13, but I was tinkering with it from when I was 5 on the Commodore 60, oh, the VIC 20. But yeah, professionally, 25 years. I think a quarter of a century is kind of a good landmark, right? Okay, let's go implement this and move this on. Um, so the thing we're missing is no update on that, right? Because we don't have an actual method for updating that thing. So we need to do two things. We need to go here and say planning item dot update status model dot status. Oh, we don't have that. Ugh, I hate that that's got to be necessary. That this is something I don't like. Um, we need to have the update model take a status. Of string status. I don't want it to default there. Now let's create a method on the planning item. Then if status equals status, we don't need a specific status updated right now. So we don't need anything to do with that. But that's that. I'd like to rethink that because having to pass that method in all the time, that parameter in all the time is annoying. So obviously I've broken everything else because now, yeah, expected status. These will all be broken because of that. Um, let's do this. Private read only string current status equals status. Again, avoiding the whole naming it after. Something like that. Oh, because I put it in the wrong place. I'm forgetting that I'm not always passing projects. Okay, that's that. That's that. That. Um, in there. No. So to me, this isn't. Um, this is a good standard story, right? This is basically the sort of stuff that's always going to go into the project. Um, run the test, see what happens now. We get a pass. We're updating the stats now. So where else we need to change? We need to change the application because the application doesn't pass that down. We don't have any tests around that, which is probably not ideal. Planning when no changes are made, when planning item is not found. So we're capturing that. We also want to capture one of the things I want to validate there is when status is changed, there's a because it's a string, it could be passed in as empty. I don't want to um, ignore the fact that it could be that could happen, right? Because something could pass in as empty and I'm just not going to validate it. And then, yeah, that's going to be a challenge. So now, again, there's the code in the handler to validate the change. But I shouldn't allow it because another piece of code could call this one, right? Oh, why are you not doing that? It's weird. When status is empty, right? So it's essentially this, right? For the sake of it, it's essentially this. The only difference being um, um, update status is captured. No update. No status is not changed. So I'm expecting current status. Right. And this is going to be invalid status. Result is true because it should be true. No flying item update event is queued. So again, I'm just trying to describe the system. Right? I'm trying to describe that that will be protected against. And it's a side effect of me using strings. It opens up that risk, to be honest. Okay. So in the interest of moving forward, I'm not going to mess around with that now. And that's going to be a big risk for me going forward is I'm deliberately not doing some things because I think it's just not useful for the stream. And that's going to, yeah. Now this needs status. Best dot details dot status. I could put validations on here, right? But again, it doesn't prevent down the line. Yeah, this one's broken anyway because this needs a status. This needs So I do need to say that the status change would get through there because this would deal with if the status changed, this wouldn't trigger. So I do need to put in some deeper testing. So when no changes are made is not sufficient. Now I need to say, okay, when anything changes, because I need to say and um, yeah, it's not it's not perfect. It's not exactly what I want to do in the long term, but it is there. Okay, so we now have that introduced. And as I said, I'd get it done in a stream. I thought. So we outlined we need to update the endpoint, not a status enum became a string. Um, that's the sort of thing if my developers, if the teams I'm working with, if they are making it, if we've talked about something and we planned something out and said, oh, we're going to include an enum, and we're going to do this, we're going to do this, I want to see a comment added on a story to explain that decision as to, it became a string, etc. Just to record that fact outside of the actual code base as to why that became a thing. So that a discussion happened, said, oh, it's not practical to use this, let's do this. That means that if I'm reviewing the story from a PR perspective and I'm like, where's the enum, right? That discussion is captured. It's a useful piece of information to capture. I think too often those things get lost. And those discussions may have happened, they may have been overheard, they may not have done, but it's always worth something recording something like that. So we've introduced a new column. Again, no enum. We've added a new we've updated the handler. We've updated the create handler inadvertently. We don't need to update the create explicitly here because the create itself, the add planning item, I haven't put source in here at all, right? Or status because I defaulted it, right? So the planning item itself knows about its default state. Whereas if I put it in here, then I've got some extra behavior in here. So yeah, that's why I didn't do that. And we've got no validation other than it's not empty. So again, because we've made it a string, we have had another impact, right? We can't not have, we can we can have no value potentially. So we do need a little bit of validation that it's not empty. Now the update integration event is the final piece. Let's do some commits. Update planning item script to click status. The more I'm thinking about my commit notes as well, the more I'm realizing that if I broke these up into separate repositories, these commits would make more sense. I'm having to remember to add some level of context to every commit message because I'm if I go back and look at commit notes, they're not going to make any sense. They need some sort of, oh, well, by the way, it's on this component or it's this piece of the system that you actually updated. Because update planning item, well, several versions of planning item exist. Where are doggos? Digging a hole. That's where they know where the camera is as well. Yeah. So introduce status on planning item. mean, you can feed in whatever you want, but we have no validation for that anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. Okay, so the next step, we need to branch foundation now. Feature setting status on planning item. So I'm going to name the branch of foundation the same. So foundation is the one that's carrying the event. So foundation is here. This is actually a separate repository. Integration event, planning item. So we now need to include status on this one. Public string status. And include status on planning. Okay. And now we need to go back to our planning. So the reason why the integration event fires on all those changes and it's deduped so that it doesn't fire multiple times. So now we have subscribers, planning item updated, publish integration. So now this integration will fire, and these are based off a default, right? So now I should just be able to do status equals planning item dot status. There we go. Now we have the integration event. So now no matter what changes it will publish. So it will be a component. It will be published as part of that. I don't have to do explicit publishing based upon what changed, etc. Include status in integration event publishing. Don't know why that needs capitalization. And there we go. So I can't test very much because I don't have that ability yet. So this is where I do want to get into using like the HTTP requests, like setting up a suite of tests there would be useful because then I could say, okay, now run it through, change this, make a request to say I'm updating the status and validate that now that was. So that might be something I actually focus some time on because it would be good to have a set of automated tests or automatable tests that I can just say run all the things. The problem with is authentication, authorization stuff. These endpoints require that. So how do I do that? What's the right way of tackling that? I haven't done that sort of stuff before in this, so that's going to be an entire lesson. But yeah, that, as they say, is that. So we got story one done, right? Oh, need to collapse that. I think it's there you go. Does that work on mass? No. Does it do that? No. That'd be awesome if it did. So we got story one done. The next piece would be to get the UI updating to capture that value. We'll hard code the list for right this second. And then we need to get it publishing. So when it changes, we need to get it publishing. So again, if we were working as part of a team, these two stories can happen in parallel. There's nothing saying that it can't be done. These three stories can be done in parallel. So there's nothing saying they can't be done independently, other than the fact that I'm one person and I'm not that good at multitasking. Yeah. So let's push that branch off my machine. Push that branch off the machine. Um, because they're named the same branch, the unit tests will run and there's no unit tests around that part, so it wouldn't have failed anyway. I don't think. Although there's no fallback, that would have actually been a good test for something there. But yeah. So I hope I hope it's becoming more obvious the direction I'm trying to head in with this, because to me things are starting to make a little bit more like they're becoming a little bit more solidified in terms of like um, I'm able to validate the ideas I've had and the ideas I do have, and I still think I actually now do believe that this is a useful tool in terms of gathering these requirements, because there's things here that would have been put in stories in my experience at least, that would have just been dumped in stories and leave open quite wide assumptions about how it should be implemented. And just going through this exercise of talking about this, obviously I came up with something yesterday that today I flip flopped on and decided, no, any number doesn't make sense. And it's okay for this right now because it doesn't, there's no, oh, we're going to change that frequently. We might need, we might need to have flexibility on the status, etc. Maybe there is flexibility on the status. Maybe when it gets put in front of a customer, that they say, well, I don't want the statuses to I'd like the statuses to be represented differently. So then you're like, oh, well, now a table makes sense because we need to be able to maintain that and allow them to override defaults. But that's different behavior. Um, and again, that can come later with analysis and planning. So right now I don't have any other requirement, but there's 4 stories that came off this one requirement, right? And that's often where I get stuck when it comes to planning stories in reality, is when a PM sits down and goes through things and says, this is a requirement. You've got to figure out how a requirement of a story that is put there actually pertains to code. And sometimes that isn't just neatly wrapped up with one commit or one piece. So um, yeah, I think it's very important to give us that flexibility. And I think this does kind of head towards that path of we can we can how do I say it? Consolidate. I don't mean consolidate, but basically we can say, okay, well, you know, this is the actual requirement and this is the actual work they do. They achieve the requirements, but the requirements are nice and understandable from everyone's perspective, whereas the technical aspects can be there. So last year, how are you doing? Welcome in. How are things? Good, I guess. Can I steal 5 minutes of your time? Um, Depends on what you need, to be honest. If it's something I can help with, then sure. Um, Bash configuration. I am not the best person to explain bash configuration, unfortunately for you. Um, there are people in the Discord that probably do understand a little bit more about that. Maybe not my Discord though. Maybe OneLine's Discord probably has more people. I have to configure bash. I'm not sure what source to follow. I'm not sure I am your best person there. I don't see anyone online. One in Napalm. I mean, Xcoding or Thindle might help with that. Yeah, that's what I was like thinking. Um, oh no, I've only got one shout out chance. um, One line here has is another uh, .NET developer. His community overlaps, but you're more than welcome to drop in to Discords if you're interested and ask some questions. My Discord doesn't. I don't think there's a lot of Bash people in my Discord, but I know that Thindle definitely hangs out in one lines. And yeah, no worries. I'm sorry I can be more helpful there. Not something I do a lot of. I'm a I'm a Windows person. I when I do when I do need to do anything with bashes, go and do the same sort of stuff. Go and like muddle through and figure it out and find whatever resources I can to get there and just get achieved what I need to get achieved. Okay, Manatonics, hello. How you doing? Welcome in. Yeah, so continuing my shout out, by the way, OneLine is also a .NET developer. Works on Blazor, whereas I work on Angular and stuff on the UI, but we're both .NET developers. Um, a wealth of knowledge, wealth of experience, and an awesome stream to hang out in as well. Um, Schoolwork the last year by any chance? My task required Ubuntu installation. Now struggling. Yeah. No? Oof. That's even worse. No, got an easy day, work day today, which is nice. Well, sadly, I don't. I have meetings starting very soon. I haven't eaten any breakfast yet. So, um, well, I would highly recommend asking then in One Lion's Discord again. Thindle, um, new developer. Gotcha. Well, congratulations, congratulations. Um, I started the stream off saying that software development is frustrating, and I can't remember what other words I used, but I was trying to represent the ups and downs, the there's the frustration, there's the irritation, there's the annoyances of not getting to where you want to get to, and but then there's the satisfaction, the highs, and whatnot that come from achieving things. Yeah. Currently cursing Azure AD myself. Why is MS the only damn place that uses scopes as a user claim and not a general claim? Client credentials flow and user flows. But I, I'll be honest, I absolutely detest anything like speaking. I detest going anywhere near auth in general because there's just so many different terms to get your head around, and if you're not in it day to day, you just never like. I haven't got the experience that I need there. So when they're talking about claims and roles and uh whatever other terms come out there. It's just a mess and hard to understand. And then it seems like there's no real consistency to how you should do things. So frustrating. I'm sure there is, but I don't see it. Okay. Well, I do have to run. I will be back tomorrow. We're gonna raid. Who are we gonna raid? Strategy game. Tuesday. I want to just raid into random people that I've never raided into before. There's a stand above this company makes this design decision and this company makes that. Gotcha. No worries. We're going to raid one line. Not one line. I wish I could raid one line, but that isn't happening today. We're going to raid Fullbots again because Fullbots is the streamer I know. It's a great stream to go to. He's a funny guy and his game looks awesome and is worth checking out. If you ever have any of the developers, like .NET developers, app developers that you know of that I should raid, please shout them out before I finish the stream because I do want to get into expanding the community, and I find my list is full of game developers all the time, and it's you don't always want to go to game dev. I mean, I know several of you are in here, but the option is nice. But anyway, have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining me. I will be back tomorrow where we'll continue the next story in this, which is getting the integration working, and we'll move forward to getting the status in. So by the end of the week, we'll have the status on this thing and we'll be moving forward with the project. So take care all. Yeah, yeah, it'd be great to be able to raid into other dev streamers. And there's a lot of game devs, which is cool. But yeah. But anyway, thank you very much. I will see you soon. Take care. Bye all.